Welcome to the show. I am so excited to have joining me today, Olivia Jaras. She's here to talk to us today about how we can value ourselves and how we can help to close the gender wage gap. Thank you so much, Olivia, for joining me today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. And you have spoken all around the world to so many women. So it's an absolute pleasure and a thrill to have you today. Thank you for speaking with us and for sharing your knowledge with us. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Well, I am thrilled and honored and truthfully flattered to be here. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And you're also a mom too. So you have a very busy, hectic schedule. So I'm glad that we were able to fit everything in. And how many kids do you have, Olivia?
I've got two kiddos.
Oh, okay.
Two kiddos. One is 9 and one is just turned 7.
Oh, boys or girls or?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. So my 9-year-old is a girl, a very, very girly girl. And my 7-year-old, here's a bit of an interesting story. He is a boy, but he wasn't always a boy. He was born a girl. And I think this it's such a powerful story because I've made a living out of helping women figure out their worth and how to advocate for themselves and how to be more of their womanhood, right? But early on with my younger son, I was presented with a bit of a challenge. Like, he was born Lucia, a girl. And every time Lucia would have a meltdown, up until the age of around 3, they would end in, "Mommy, I want to die."
Oh, wow.
And as a mom, you're like, "Oh my gosh, like, what the heck am I doing so wrong as a parent? What's wrong?" And one night I was trying to get my kids to bed, and it was just so evident that something was so wrong. And my husband was out of town. He was on a business trip. I'm like, what the heck do I do? What is really, like, how can I be that shitty of a mom? Pardon my French. And I ended up calling the Suicide Hotline. I was like, I don't know what to do. My kid's trying to die, like, wants to just die. And I put the operator, the woman on the other end of the line, to speak with Lucy. And it became so evident right then and there what the problem was. And when they hung up the phone, I'm like, "Lucy, have mommy and daddy gotten it all wrong this time? We've been treating you like a girl, but you're a boy?" And he goes, "Yes, mommy, I'm a boy." And I kid you not, he is 7 years old today. And we changed pronouns effective immediately that day and started to treat him as a boy. And never again, ever, has he uttered those words, "Mommy, I want to die."
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Crazy.
That's so
Crazy.
powerful. I'm getting goosebumps. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure there's a lot of mothers out there that might be clicking with that, might be going through something similar. So that's really powerful that you share that. And I'm so happy that he feels better for him not to say that anymore. That's a really beautiful thing. Did he go through any sort of therapy or anything following up from that? Or no, it just really helps him once you started accepting what he was saying?
Well, I mean, he is a boy. Like, he everything boy is him, right? There's been some interesting conversations. Of course, we've talked to therapists, endocrinologists, and as far as we can tell, it's pretty straightforward transgender child. And there's a couple of things to that. Like, one of the usual questions that I get is like, well, what if it's just a phase, right? What if you're encouraging something that doesn't have to be, right? Maybe he'll decide that he's a girl later on. Well, the truth is, there's 2 times in your life at which you choose. There's 2 junctures in which you choose your gender. One is roughly when you're 2 years old, and the other one is when you're in your teenage years. But usually when you see someone who's so adamantly a boy at this age and so decided as far as their gender comes, even when they can't necessarily describe what gender is, but they gravitate so strongly, it's a pretty straightforward case. So does this mean that he could or could not change later on? who knows? I do not have a crystal ball, nor does anybody, right? So that's in the realm in terms of like gender, but the difficulty of having this kind of situation is not really in terms of therapy. Like the therapists and endocrinologists, doctors, everybody who's encountered Lou has been so encouraging about us encouraging him throughout his journey, because here's the thing, the truth is transgender people, if there's like this astounding rate of a suicide attempt, which is like something like 70 plus percent of transgender individuals attempt suicide throughout their lives, which is insane. It's crazy.
It is.
But the truth is, most of them feel unsupported. And when they look at those who have felt supported throughout their lives, that suicide rate literally goes like down to next to zero.
It's just about the environment, who you have around you.
And support, right? Are you accepted in your community or not? And so far, the community, I mean, has been super accepting. He started kindergarten being a boy. All of his peers, everybody accepts him. The only ones who have like an interesting reaction at times is like the parents, because they don't know how to deal with this. Of course,
something new.
It wasn't necessarily okay when we were growing up, but it's so much more normal now for kids these days. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think over the last decade too, there's been big changes, because even in, like you were saying, in our childhood, it was starting to be accepted. You know, I remember growing up and sometimes there would be same-sex couples and those are the parents of the kids in class. But I think something like this generation, they're going to be so much more accepting, like you're saying. And as you were saying also, that one of the concerns is, well, what if they want to change back or anything like that? That's not really a factor if you're accepting and supporting either way. You're just being cognizant of what your child is trying to tell you, if they want to change back, if they don't want to change back, whatever the case is. So, you know, either way, as long as they have that support, they'll be all right, no matter what it ends up being at the end of the day. And it's so interesting that even before this happened to you, you already had this passion for helping women sort of close the gender wage gap. This sort of idea of gender was already something that was really within you. I wonder if that was in some way going to prepare you to be accepting and to sort of already have that in mind. You know, it's amazing the path that we go on and why we, you know, go through the journeys that we go through. We don't know where it's going to lead and what the purpose is behind it. And when you look at the gender wage gap, it's something that seems so unfair, that men and women are paid different for the same job with the same qualifications. And it's really something that needs to change, just like the acceptance of transgender members of our community. So how did you find that passion originally for helping women to kind of close that gender wage gap, and the steps you've taken to help them on it?
Yeah, it's funny how life really just throws curveballs at you, right? That you have no idea what to expect. Like, this was definitely not a challenge that I was preparing or expecting as far as a parent. And truth be told, like when I started my journey into helping tens of thousands of women transform their careers, figure out their purpose, and showing them how that translates into money, I was coming from the vantage point of seeing that women weren't truly embracing the blessing of femininity, right? There's these divinely given gifts that we have just by virtue of being born a female, that if we know how to capitalize on them, we can achieve incredible things, whether that's a negotiation, whether that's a promotion, or even starting your own business. The thing is, most women, though, don't realize their true worth. They don't realize that we are, whether you call it God, the universe, whatever you believe in, whatever your faith is, like, we are God's gift to the world. And the minute that you start understanding how flippin' worthy you are, you understand that there's a translation, there's a financial translation there, that you are worth serious money. That's in essence how I got started. Was I didn't realize my worth until I found myself on my knees, basically crying and bawling at rock bottom. I was like, you know what? I'm no longer going to decide anyone. I'm not going to let anyone else decide my worth. Were you working at a corporate job at the time? Yeah, so this was like back during the Great Recession.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself being laid off from this really awesome job setting the salaries for C-suite executives and their golden parachutes and all those things
Mm-hmm.
for very big companies. And I found myself being laid off along with the rest of the team.
Mm-hmm.
And what ensued was me applying to 1,231 jobs,
Oh
literally
my gosh.
1,230 jobs. And I got 5 interviews and 0 job offers. And I remember clearly, I studied at Tufts University, which is like a school in Boston,
Mm-hmm.
supposedly a good school in Boston. And like, I showed up, I recall that one last time at the unemployment office to go claim a check so I could
Mm-hmm.
pay my bills. And I show up to the clerk. I've got the list of jobs that I'd applied for that week, right? McDonald's was there. I'd applied to 2 jobs at McDonald's and been rejected.
Mm.
And then my resume there, showed that I had like, all of these fancy accolades
Mm-hmm.
and educational background and job experience. And the clerk looks at my resume, looks at the jobs that I'd applied for those last 2 weeks. He goes like, "Gee, I guess that expensive East Coast education didn't pay off, did it?" I
That's a hard thing
collapsed.
to that's a hard thing to hear after you've invested all your time and money and passion into all of that.
I didn't even make it out of the building. I just collapsed and started
Mm.
bawling my heart out. It didn't help that my dad had just died and that my husband
Mm.
was deployed in Iraq. Like it
Oh
was a
wow.
shitty moment. I hit rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something though inside of me, like that little voice that is almost inescapable, right? That we all have, that if you truly listen to it, you know it's like this source of wisdom that's giving you such insights that I don't know that you don't really even know where it comes from, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at that moment, this tiny little voice in my head said, "You know what? It's not you. It's not you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the workforce that's rejected you. It's just that you haven't figured out how to crack the code." Kind of went back and to my obviously in tears. I don't even know how I made it back home that day. Like I was just
Mm. It was just everything in life.
demoralized. Everything had come unglued.
Mm-hmm.
And in my misery, I started to kind of reclaim my space and decide, you know what? I am never going to let anyone else decide my worth for me. And I'm going to go forth and reclaim it and decide what my market value is and
Mm-hmm.
decide what kind of opportunities I start to bring into my experience. And literally within a matter of weeks of having been rejected twice by McDonald's, let alone those 1,229 other opportunities, I went on to land a job managing like hundreds of thousands of dollars, managing projects and people in Latin America and working for the
Mm.
equivalent of the World Bank in Washington, D.C., but for Latin America,
Wow.
the Inter-American Development Bank. And I literally, it's almost like I manifested this dream job of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I replicated that further down the line, right? When my husband and I were ready to leave Washington, D.C., I did the
Mm-hmm.
same thing and landed my dream job working in a very cushy job, setting the salaries for people at an Ivy League institution, right? Because
Mm.
compensation is my thing. That's been my background.
Uh-huh.
People's salaries, what they're worth.
Mm-hmm.
So I did it for myself in
Mm.
my career, throughout my career. But then I realized at one point in this cushy corner office job that there was a bigger problem at stake that I was being called on to help solve, which was, you know what? I see other women victims of that problem of not knowing their worth and not knowing
Mm.
how to advocate for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I decided that, okay, now that I've done it for myself, I've climbed that corporate ladder, even if it was a fairly young age, like I was in my
Mm-hmm.
20s, I'm going to go ahead and
Mm-hmm.
quit this job because I see my calling. I see that it's here and
Mm-hmm.
this is where I'm meant to be helping women.
Your purpose. And that's when, now I know you have published several books and they've gone on to be bestsellers. And you've also shared your experiences and your strategies on, multiple outlets all over the world. What do you think the key is, Olivia, to really changing that mindset? Like you said, you had sort of that epiphany and you decided you were going to start valuing yourself rather than letting other people value you. How do you go about doing that for women out there listening who want to follow that same pattern? Where do you start?
You have to get absolute clarity with regards to what you want. And this is like often it's so crazy because when I coach women, most of us have like this, the starting point is where things go haywire, because as women, we've got this innate ability to multitask and to think about multiple things at any given point in time, right? Like if you think about a guy and a girl going out on a date, the guy is thinking, great, let's see if this works. It might work out really well. I can't wait to enjoy a good meal, go out for dinner. The girl, on the other hand, is thinking, oh my goodness, I am so excited. Did I put enough deodorant on? Are my pants too tight? What am I going to order off the menu? Am I going to like his parents? What would our kids look like? Where will we have our wedding? What if I don't like my future mother-in-law? Like we go through
things.
a million things in an instant in our head, right? And even though that can be one of our strengths when it comes down to advocating for ourselves, when it comes down to figuring out what we want and our deep-seated purpose that we have, that we've been given to kind of make happen here, make shit happen. Pardon my French. Sorry, I hope your audience doesn't mind.
Oh, no.
I curse every once in a while. But if you realize that the place for that multitasking comes after you get clarity, you realize that there's one thing that you're cut out to be doing. At any given point in time, there's one thing. It might shift over time, but at any given point in time, you are a genius at something. And there's a way, if you can get clear enough as to what that is and what that looks like when it becomes a reality, and what it looks like in terms of its most successful form, there's a very clear path for you to monetize it and to make it a source for your financial freedom. And whether that looks like your own business or it looks like moving up your career track, and instead of taking that career ladder, you just literally take what I call the career elevator. It can look like a couple of different options. And in fact, when you understand, when you have absolute clarity as to what you bring to the table and what your gift is, you should understand that you can capitalize on that genius zone and through multiple revenue streams. And that's truly what I help women figure out. It's like, okay, how do you monetize your genius zone?
So, I'm thinking about myself in general and women in general. I think we're also very flexible and we're open to others' opinions and all these great things, but sometimes they can be a detriment, especially when you're applying. I'm thinking of how many jobs you applied to, and women out there, if they're job hunting or they're looking for their career path or they're looking for their purpose or their passion, how do they find that? And many times we're open to other people telling us what we're good at, and we're waiting to see what jobs call us back. We'll apply to thousands of them, but we're letting other people tell us our worth. Other people tell us what skills they're valuing. So what you're saying, Olivia, is we have to understand what our purpose is first so that we can speak from a very confident sort of vantage point when we're, sort of job hunting or career hunting or looking to build whatever we're looking to build. It starts with first knowing our sort of worth, is what you're saying first?
Yes, in the sense that here's the thing, and thank you for mentioning like the job hunt, is from my vantage point and having helped so many women land their dream jobs, is the job hunting process, like you applying to jobs, implies that you have absolutely no clarity with regards to what you want. You're leaving it up to hope, and you're allowing others to decide your worth for you. But here's the truth. If you don't know what you're worth, how can you possibly expect anyone else to know it? You know yourself better than anyone does. And you're the one who gets to decide your price point and your market value. There is zero chance a recruiter, headhunter, hiring manager will ever see through everything that you've accumulated, all this career capital that's in your head that you've accumulated over the years. If you don't know how to bring that to the table, how to showcase that and how to claim it, how do you expect anybody to see it and monetize and reward you for it?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely, because we're showing up to these jobs with just a resume, and if you don't know how to really clearly explain what your value is, then you're never going to get that value, is what you're saying. You're never going to get it unless you know how to clearly communicate it.
Right. If you don't know what it is and you don't know how to communicate it, you're screwed.
I'm even thinking of, one thing I always heard in my corporate career was that I'm so soft spoken. And it was like told to me as sort of like a detrimental thing. They're like, oh, you're so soft spoken, and I was in a predominantly male dominated industry in banking. And, I was soft spoken. I am soft spoken. I'm a woman, but I'm confident when I speak. And, I've always been comfortable speaking and speaking up about my opinions. So instead, if I had listened to all those men telling me, oh, you're so soft spoken and people must just walk all over you, then I wouldn't have been able to sort of make this show and say, no, I am confident. I speak confidently. I speak my mind. You have to know what you're worth and then run with it. If I listen to all of those men telling me that, I need to change that and I need to be more of a bitch, then, that's where I would get is where they wanted me to go. So you have to kind of make your own path. So as you were saying, with the job hunt and about how you clearly communicate your skills and your values, does that start with the resume or with the interview itself, or what action steps should we start taking to start understanding our value and start being able to communicate it clearly so we can start getting the worth that we deserve?
My starting point is always, where are you already omnipresent 24/7 when it comes down to your career, right? And that, at least here in the US, and honestly, it's pretty much predominant all over the world, is LinkedIn. Whether you like it or not, if you have a LinkedIn profile or if you created one years ago and you haven't touched it, it's showcasing you 24/7. Whether you like it or not. And your LinkedIn profile will be scoured before you're ever asked for a resume or an interview. So why not make it easier on yourself and just go where you were already being seen and understand that right there is showcasing your brand, your business, right? The CEO of you has a marketing department. And it's been basically asleep at the wheel. So why don't you just go to your LinkedIn profile and really just put in the work? And we do this thing every few months called the LinkedIn Challenge, the Her LinkedIn Challenge, which is like a 2-week challenge. And our next one's coming up in February, where over 2 weeks, I help women like with tiny micro installments throughout 14 days to show them like the tiny tweaks that they need to be making to showcase their professional brand and really to embody that brand. Because whether we like it or not, we're a walking, talking brand. We evoke feelings in other people, in other companies. And that's the essence of a brand, right? Like Nike with its swoosh, just do it. It evokes not sentiments for that swoosh, but rather for the emotions. It generates these emotions of like, I got this. I can just go ahead and do it and be a badass. Like every company out there is trying to be a brand, to evoke feelings in us so that we can buy and be persuaded and conveyed into their message. And the same goes for people. But you don't actually have to have like a Nike swoosh, or you don't have to try to be a corporation. You already have a brand. You already, just by virtue of being human, you evoke feelings in someone else. And you're evoking feelings on your LinkedIn profile, whether you like it or not. Sometimes those feelings are non-existent because the recruiter, headhunter, hiring manager cannot see your profile because you're not an active user. So that's where I would say, start with where you're being visible. Start on LinkedIn.
Start creating a personal brand. Start creating values that represent you, showcasing what your skills are on LinkedIn, what you're specialized in. Just start creating a personal brand for yourself and really be confident in using it a lot. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Though I take it a step further and just rather than your skills, like understand that you have a genius zone. And when you stop hiding, like, because there's two kinds of profiles that I often see, like the profiles that are just completely empty, that tell me clearly this woman has no confidence, does not believe in herself, and or has stalled on putting things in her profile, either because she doesn't know how to use LinkedIn, or because she doubts herself and her abilities and what she brings to the table, like confidence is lacking. Or there's the other extreme where women like fill their profile out with skills and accomplishments and accolades and things that they've done, but they're hiding their true self behind all those skills, right? So what I'm telling you to do is not just flesh out your skills and what you bring to the table, but furthermore, infuse your brand into your skills and accolades and what you bring to them. Because it's a very different picture for me to read a profile that has no life to it, but has a million different skills and accomplishments and educational background. Like, it's just a list of things. It doesn't give me any emotional response. So if you want to stand out, you need to make sure that you've infused you into the profile.
It absolutely does. So LinkedIn in this day and age is really like the new form of resume. You still need a resume, but LinkedIn is a way that everyone can see you worldwide. Everyone can search you in one moment. And nowadays you have to develop a personal brand. It's not just developing a resume that's living a list. You need to develop a personal brand. I wonder, Olivia, if men typically do a better job at more confidently, putting themselves out there or posting or creating these digital profiles. And I wonder if that is contributing at all to the wage gap. Are women not being as confident and putting themselves out there as much, do you think? Or is the wage gap in general more pertain to the sort of company standards and, HR practices? Is it about the way we're presenting ourselves as women that we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage? Or are those two separate things?
So beyond it being about positioning, I think it comes down to men claim their power. No lack of confidence, in the same way that like women, we don't claim our power. And in many ways, it's not because we're not good enough. It's just that we, as emotional beings, right? All right, let me give you my true belief on the gender wage gap. There are very few excuses for why we have a gap. But truth be told, the blame doesn't necessarily land on the shoulders of companies or the government. I feel that companies, and this is, I know that this might be a bit of a polarizing statement to make, but in my experience, and again, having helped at this point tens of thousands of women close their own internal gap, like oftentimes as women, we love to blame our boss, the company, the government for not having enough policies or regulations in place. But here's the thing, you always have a choice, and it's up to you to decide whether or not you stay in your job, whether or not you stay in your job until you find something that pays you better, whether or not you decide that I'm no longer going to stand for this, right? And furthermore, though, where I do think the blame falls is, it is a little bit more on the shoulders of women. And it is because, again, this kind of gift that we were talking about that can serve you really, really well in pursuing your vision, like, we have this innate ability to think about many things at any given point in time, right? And the emotional side of us tends to turn this ability inwards to our detriment. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. As women, you can be in a negotiation, for example, with your boss at the negotiation table, and if you're using these tools, this ability to multitask or multi-think at any given point in time, right? If you're using this wisely, you're going to be a better negotiator than a guy could ever dream of being, because you're going to be thinking about, what is this guy saying, right? What is your negotiation counterpart saying? What are they thinking? What is the room feeling like? What is his body language telling me? how can I use his own words to my advantage? Like, you're thinking about a wide variety of things externally. But as women, we tend to turn this inward against ourselves. And when you turn these abilities inwards, this is where you start thinking, I'm not good enough. That comment that my math teacher said back in second grade must be true. Like, I'll never be a success, or I'm a failure at math, or I'm like, we start spinning internally. And this is where this self-doubt becomes absolutely rampant, and it ends up manifesting itself in ourselves just not feeling, not believing that we are worthy of more.
No, that definitely does. And the way I'm thinking about that negotiation when you're in that interview, and the next thing that comes up after the interview is obviously at some point you'll have a salary negotiation and all that. I think also, like you're saying, we're not speaking from a confident point of view, and also the language that we use as women tends to be different than men. Do you think? I think we use sort of lighter language. When I know that if we're in conferences, women tend to say, I think it should be this way, or what do you think about this idea? Where men say it should be this way, and they speak more confidently. Are those the sort of tips and skills we should bring into that initial meeting and the interview, those negotiations? What can we do to sort of be cognizant of the fact that we need to be more confident, in those sort of meetings?
I don't think you should change the way you use your language. I think you should use it wisely. You see, because here's like a great example, like, of a conversation I had once with my husband. And we were thinking about, do we get a treadmill, or do we get like a sauna, something like, it was like a very like ridiculous conversation, but he goes, I haven't decided yet which sauna I want to get. Right. And I was like, whoa. You haven't decided yet? Honey, what's going on here? Like, am I not part of the conversation? Yeah. Like, well, yeah, of course you are. But thinking through that language, right? It's okay for men, socially speaking, we're trained to understand, like, a guy is okay for them to use that kind of language. But if you come to the table and you say, I have not yet decided what sauna I'm going to buy.
Totally different meaning behind it.
Body, aggressive.
Yes.
Who the heck does she think she is? Right? So there's a reason why our internal radar uses this softer language. And we need to use it. Like, we can be very deliberate with our words. And I love using these softer words. Like, what is that saying? Speak softly, but carry a big stick. And I think that truly is what women can do with this softness.
I didn't even think about it that way. It sort of gives us if you look at it, it can give you a different advantage, because one of the things, especially in the corporate world, is everyone's intimidated by everyone else. I think in everyone's mind, whoever you meet in corporate or in business in general, you think, could they replace me? Are they going to get promoted ahead of me? Is my boss going to like them better? So as women, if we're actually going to use that sort of softer side of us to our advantage, that might help us sort of gain more allies, be a little less intrusive, but we have to do it in a very skillful way, is what you're saying. Use it to our advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's almost like the automatic assumption is that a guy's way is the better way. I'm like, not at all. Not at all. If guys realize that the power that women have to sway things in our direction, yeah, it's just not a man's world.
We just almost shouldn't let them know that we're in control of it.
Right. We don't need to let them know that we're in control. We can let them think that they're in control, and we can change things. Like, this, though, is also coupled with the thought that because we're soft-spoken, that because we're not overtly assertive, we are lesser than. That's where the problem happens.
Yes.
Right? We don't claim our power, but we think that claiming our power means being assertive, aggressive, direct, uncompromising. Does that make sense?
So how would you recommend then that we claim our power?
By using these tools, understanding what you want.
Okay.
And then understanding that you have everything it takes inside of you. You've got all of those tools to claim it, to become it. And I mean, I don't want to really get into politics, but there's been historical examples of women who have shown up trying to embody very masculine traits to achieve things, right? And like a very clear example, and I hope this is okay, but like Hillary Clinton.
I knew you were going to say it before you spoke it. I knew that's what you were thinking because I immediately thought of the same thing.
Hillary Clinton, if she had embodied her feminism during the election, instead of trying to compete with the masculine energy, she would have swayed all of us in and taken it like by storm. But then, for example, the contrary example of that is, you know, and it's a different context, but Oprah Winfrey. She has captured, like literally, if Oprah decided to run for president,
in 5 minutes, you know, she'd be number one.
There'd be no election.
Exactly.
I know.
But she doesn't seem to use her platform in that way. I wonder why,
but she doesn't need to. Her purpose is to change lives, right? And help people transform at more of like a soul level. And she's literally one of the wealthiest women in the world. She's got billions of followers. Like, she's using her power of influence in the way that it was given for her. She's not assertive. She's not pushy. She's not aggressive. And she's using all of these skills that we as women have been told that they belong in the home, that they're mothering skills. But what we don't realize, and this is like, there's one thing that I wish your listeners take back with themselves is you have every tool you could possibly want already to be the most powerful person in the room. You've just been sold this lie that those are motherly skills, that they belong hidden at the house and like cooking dinner and raising children, which by the way, like I need a superpower that we can raise children
and do all of the other things as well at the same time.
Everything at the same time. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy to me.
Our ability to multitask and to think 10 steps ahead is really sort of like a superpower that we have as women. So rather than turning that back on ourselves, what you're saying, Olivia, is to just come from a point of being cognizant of, am I being confident? Am I portraying confidence? And get rid of that self-doubt, because that ability to think 10 steps ahead will work against us if we allow it to work against us. So it's about mindset.
Yes, indeed.
So number one, it starts with mindset, and the gender gap, the gender wage gap. We have to take control of our personal brand and start building it, and sort of overall, one woman at a time will close the gender wage gap is how we'll do that. I know another key item that you are well known for is resume writing, and you're world renowned for your resume writing. Do you have any sort of tips for us in terms of how we should go about resume writing? Or I know you mentioned LinkedIn is really sort of the new digital resume and way to build a personal brand. So we should really start with that sort of platform and that resource. Do you have any other sort of tips or action steps that you think we should start implementing to build our personal brand, whether that's on LinkedIn, on resume writing and networking events? Anything else that you recommend to us as action steps we can start taking today, Olivia?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to resume writing, one of the biggest mistakes that I see is people try to think of it as a bragging post for their accomplishments, when it really should just mirroring the needs of your dream opportunity. So when it comes down to building your brand, I really want you to start thinking like, I am the CEO of me. What does that mean? That means I have a marketing department, and I also have a sales department, and I have an asset that I need to capitalize on. And how, first of all, like, what is that worth? What am I going to sell that for? And the way you do that is putting the finger back on the pulse of your market. Like, what is my position paying? Or what are other coaches or consultants charging for what I bring to the table, right? So regardless of whether you find yourself in the market and whatever it is that you do, you have an asset. It is for sale or it is monetizable. If you don't have the finger on the pulse of your market, there's zero chance you're going to really understand what your market is doing and what they want. And then your branding department is about serving your audience what they want, right? And then giving them. So if I can have you understand that this is you as a CEO of you, you're going to see that when it comes down to your branding, there's two things happening. There's what your dream audience or your opportunity audience holder wants, and then there's what they need. They need all the skills that you bring to the table, but that's not what you sell them on. You sell them on what they want.
Which is more the softer skills, like the interpersonal skills and the confidence and all of those sort of pieces outside of your accolades and things like that. It's more on you.
That's more of like all right, understand that it's never been about you. It's always about what they want. And when you understand your audience, when you understand that dream employer wants, you make your LinkedIn and your resume about what they want.
Okay.
You literally spoon feed them what they're looking for.
You mirror it back in that way. Be strategic in that way. And you mentioned to keep your finger sort of on the pulse of the industry and on the market, because that's when it comes down to negotiations and price points and things like that. It's hard though, because some companies have restrictions on, coworkers can't tell you what they're making and all of that. What would you say is the best resource for us to make sure that we're keeping a finger on the pulse in terms of salaries and price points and all of that?
Just research. I'd say yes. Absolute research on who are your competitors. Like if you understand your audience, you're going to understand where they live. Understanding that it's not about you, but it's about what your market wants. Also, there's all sorts of different tools for you to research. I mean, we help women. Like this is what we do at my organization. We help women figure out what their worth is and how to advocate for it.
Because you have workshops as well. Not only your books, you have workshops and different resources and a coaching program as well.
Yeah. We're always teaching free workshops. So, I mean, if anybody's interested in checking them out, we also have a free community that they can check out. They can find it through my website and join. We have a free movement and a paid movement, all sorts of different things, resources.
We'll have links to all of that in the show notes for anyone listening as well. And you can find that on our social media posts as well to get in touch with Olivia. I did want to ask you just one more thing about in terms of negotiations, Olivia. Somebody told me something once and I wasn't wondering if it's true. They said, always, whenever you get a job offer, come back with at least one counter offer for your salary. Is that true?
That's absolutely a good approach.
Always try one more time.
Yeah, but I think there's some context to that. What I would say is you always accept the offer and then ask for the salary. So, because separate the things. Like, yes, I accept this job offer. That said, could you help me get closer to this price point or salary point?
Make it clear that you're very interested in it. You want to accept it if they can help you a little bit with it. And this way you see if you can just get a little bit more at the time, sort of that way to go about it.
Offer.
Yes, you don't want to do that. But it seems to be, as you were saying, once you know your personal brand and you have a clear idea of what your dream job is, and then you really go after it with confidence, that's where you're going to find the most value. Whether or not you get an extra $5,000 at the end of the day is not going to make your life happier. It's about knowing your worth to begin with and finding where you want to live in terms of your career, your purpose, ultimately.
Right, exactly.
See, I've learned from you in our conversation, Olivia. So for our listeners out there, Olivia, what is the best way to get in touch with you and learn more and to follow everything that you do?
Absolutely. Find me on LinkedIn. Send me a message. Friend me on LinkedIn if you'd like. That's probably the best place. But also check out my website at oliviajaras.com.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Olivia, for so genuinely sharing with us, not only your knowledge, but really your life with us. It was really, really interesting and inspiring to hear about your children and about Lou. So thank you so much for sharing that story with us and with the moms out there. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure.
Looking forward to talking to you again soon.